And okay, we are recording now, and so folks, this is part 2 of the hawk presentation by Ron Harrington, who's with the Bristol Bird Club and also the coordinator for the Mendota Tower Hawk Watch. And so, Ron, I'm going to turn this over to you now.
Okay, can you see me?
I can.
And you hear me?
I can.
All right. Well, today we're going to start off with the Raptor Population Index. This past year, while everybody was hunkered down, a lot of the conferences about hawks were virtual. So I attended 3 conferences. One was on the Raptor Population Index. Another one was on the Hawk Mountain Broadwing Hawk Tracking Project, which I would like to share that with you today also. And another one was about the rise and fall of the northern goshawks in central Appalachia. And I mentioned that a little bit in my first session last week. Now, the Raptor Population Index is a study of raptors. They've got, and I'll tell you a little more about that in a moment. There's 25 species that they're studying. And a lot of the data we submit through our hawk counts and Christmas bird counts and the breeding bird surveys are being used as a part of this study. And if you want to see all this, review this, you can just go to Google RPI, Raptor Population Index. One of the questions is, why should we study raptors? What's the value of focusing on raptors? Of course, the word raptor comes from rapere, the Latin word rapere, which means to seize or plunder. And for thousands of years, countless cultures revered birds of prey as representatives of strength, freedom, and the power of nature. And today, their ability to survive is threatened. And why are they important? Because they serve as a barometer of ecological health of our environment. They're at the top of the food chain in every environment. So threats like pesticides, habitat loss, and climate change have the most dramatic impact on these species. They're known as an indicator species. There are about 450 species of raptors in the world. In North America, we have 34 diurnal raptors, that means raptors of the daytime, and we have 20 nocturnal raptors. Kind of interesting. So researching the population trends of raptors provides a cost-effective and efficient way to detect the effects of the Raptor Population Index. It was launched in 2004 as a collaborative effort to understand and share trends and conservation status of migratory raptors in North America. It uses data from partnering sites that submit data to hawkcount.org, like the Hawk Migration Association of North America, Hawk Watch International, Hawk Mountain Sanctuary Association, and Birds Canada. They analyze data every 3 years using these multiple data sets, which I mentioned earlier, Christmas bird count, migration counts, and breeding bird surveys. The 2019 update represents over 43,000 observation hours and almost 8.9 million migrants that were counted. There were 76 qualifying sites from which they collected data. And when I'm saying qualifying sites, I'm talking about the migration sites. Here's their map kind of showing the migration sites. Most of them, as you can see, are in the east. There's just only a couple in the central here, and just a handful out in the west, and a few in the Gulf area here as well. Now, the ones in the east include 4 Virginia sites: Rockfish Gap, Snickers Gap, Chiptopeki on the eastern shore, Harvey's Knob, and Harvey's Knob. Now, there's a Hanging Rock Fire Tower, which is right on the West Virginia border, which is included as well. Now, in order to be included, you had to meet the following site criteria. 10 years of data, which we had. You have to submit the data to hawkcount.org using their protocol. To be included, an individual species must be detected on at least 50% of survey years. For example, the goshawk, which we didn't see every year, would not have been included. We didn't see it 50% of the time, would not have been included, nor would the golden eagle or the Mississippi kite, for example. You had to count for at least 75% of the migration season. Springtime, that was 30 to 35 days minimum. In the fall, 40 days minimum, which we did not meet. To meet that, we would have had started counting in 1st September and run to the 10th of October or some combination to get our 40 days in. And you had to have a minimum of 50 hours per day on the average to qualify. So hopefully 10 years from now, if you guys can get your site started up over there on the mountain, you can meet the standards here. If not, your data will be there in their data bank, and they use it for other purposes as well. It's just nice to have that there so you can go back and find it. We have lost our data, as I mentioned last week, going back beyond 2010. We just can't find our data, although we've been counting hawks up there since 1958. And that's another reason I belong to the Project Feeder Watch. I've been participating in that since for about 32 years. It's sponsored by the Cornell University Lab of Ornithology. You count birds at your feeders during the winter and submit it to them using their protocols. You're supposed to count 2 days a week. You can count as little as you want to, or as much as you want to during those times. And that data will be there. I can go back, 30 years and find my data. So that's kind of neat. So what was the overall results from the 2019 index? Looking at 25 species. Now you can Google RPI and find all this information, detailed information about each individual species. 67% of the species were stable, 22% showed declines, and 11% showed increases. Now here's a little pie chart, which I'm sure you can't read very well, which shows the species that contributed most to the recent declines. Sharp-shinned hawk, for example, was 38%. They were the number one here. Red-tailed hawk, weren't many of them, but 31%. Osprey, 22%. The northern harrier, which is over here, was about 29%. And then the Cooper's hawk, 18%. So which species were considered at risk? Looking at it from 2009 to 2019, you can see there the top of the list with the sharp-shinned hawk. 48% of the sites showed declines, and so on down the list. I won't read all these to you. I hope you can see them. Northern goshawk, rough-legged hawk, the red-tailed hawk, which we'll talk about a little more later. It showed there, you see 30 sites, or 41% of the sites had declines in the red-tailed hawk count. Now we're talking about the migration counts here. Northern harrier, osprey, Cooper's hawk, and the American kestrel. Now they took it back another 10 years. So from 1999 to 2019, the number one there, instead of the sharp-shinned hawk, the number one was rough-legged hawk, and the northern goshawk. American kestrel came in third. Red-tailed hawk was fourth. Sharp-shinned hawk, northern harrier, the osprey, and a new one to the list, the red-shouldered hawk, and the last one on the list was the Cooper's hawk. So which hawks showed increases? Well, this is not a surprise. The number one was bald eagle, bouncing back particularly from the decreases caused by pesticides, particularly DDC, which was banned in the United States in 1972. So the bald eagles came at the top of the list there, and the vultures are increasing. They came in number two. Mississippi kites, which again, we don't see at the tower just once in a while. We saw one in the last 10 years. Peregrine falcon was fourth, and number 5 on the list there for the raptors on the rise was the black vulture. We see turkey vultures and black vultures at the fire tower, but do not count them. We consider them local vultures. If you want to count vultures or look at vultures that are actually migrating, you need to be up there mid-November, early November to mid-November to see turkey vultures. Okay, getting the real picture. Early on when they were looking at these migration data, someone said, well, wait a minute now, you may not be getting the full picture here. And it was a study published in the Condor, which is a magazine that you can subscribe to. I don't get it, but I went back and researched and found this. Condor Ornithological Applications, February 2017. And it was about the red-tailed hawks. And they were saying basically surveys that focus on a particular season, for example, the fall migration or just the winter, Christmas bird count, can cause scientists to miss trends in the bigger picture. They tackled this problem by combining red-tailed hawk counts from both migration and winter. And they found that while the hawks' numbers are stable overall, the migratory behavior is undergoing a change. They compared data, as I said, from the Raptor Population Index, which is based on counts of raptors during migration, and the Christmas bird counts. They found declining hawk numbers at 43% of the migration count sites. Let me flip on over here. Here's the map of that. And they, as I said, they found 43% decline in the migration count sites, which you see mostly over in the Northeast. Okay, and they found, where am I here? Okay, they found a 67% increase in your winter counts, which is kind of interesting to see. And your winter counts show up as increasing in green here and green out in the west, central and west, northeastern region here. Decreasing is pink. There was some decreasing in Ontario. I don't know what kind of a winter coverage they had up there. Rest of it is the gray here is stable for the winter counts as well. And the little blue circles, that represent stable as far as the migration counts as well. So what did they find out? They found out that that the 67% of the winter count showed increases spread all across the regions. And of course, the greatest increases were reported in the northern latitudes. And the data alone would suggest that red-tailed hawks on the migration data alone would suggest that red-tailed hawks are on a decline in North America. But the full picture actually indicates stable to increasing populations. The hawks appear to be wintering farther north than they have in the past, explaining the lower numbers seen on migration. And there's a term they're using for this. It's called short stopping, means they might migrate a little ways, but they stop short of the distance they used to migrate. So the bottom line, and I'm being a little repetitive here, the bottom line suggests that red-tailed hawks may be responding to climate change, land use change, or other environmental changes by migrating shorter distances or becoming year-round residents. And they're suggesting that there might be evidence that raptor migration strategies for other species as well are changing in response to climate and land use changes. So I thought that was kind of interesting to share with you. Now, what about the little sharp-shinned hawk? Here, the data, the trends, we're looking at both migratory trends as well as Christmas bird count trends suggest they are in decline. The trends could be in part a reflection of a shift in migratory behavior in the eastern populations. Let me get on over to our maps here. But the lack of increases in the wintering populations in northern states or provinces suggest population declines. So that's kind of the bottom line on the sharp-shinned hawk. Sharp-shinned hawks, of course, are vulnerable to habitat loss through forest removal and collisions, pesticides, environmental contaminants, and human harassment while nesting. And they feed primarily on small birds and inhabit about 97%, 95% of their diet, small birds. They inhabit large tracts of boreal forest. That's our high latitude forest where freezes occur 6 to 8 months in the year, both of which have been identified as areas of conservation concerns. Declines in prey, increases in contaminants, and possible climate change impacts should be investigated for them. So that's kind of the bottom line there. And, we didn't have that many, as you may have remembered, from our Christmas bird counts and that many on migration as we do, for example, the Cooper's hawk. Here shows the 48% decline in North America and 55% decline in the East, particularly. So what about the broad-winged hawk when it comes to the RPI? 10-year migration count data from broad-winged hawk for the broad-winged hawk suggests a mostly stable population trend. 82% of 72 sites reported no significant change. 11% of the sites, all located in the eastern region, reported a decrease during this span. Of the 53 eastern sites, 15% showed declines. Now, sites with declines were predominantly located in inland regions along the eastern Appalachians and in Piedmont. Regional declines of eastern populations appear to be occurring in areas undergoing urbanization and suburban sprawl. This is what we call land use change. A small number of broad-winged hawks winter in the United States, as I mentioned last week. However, data from the Christmas bird count suggests the number may be increasing, perhaps representing a winter rain shift. We're talking about now birds that winter, mostly juveniles, winter in southern part of Florida, and also they're now finding that they tend to winter in around the Gulf Coast and Louisiana and perhaps in parts of Texas. Let me move on here without pushing the wrong button. Here's the migration and winter trends. Of course, broadwings, you're not going to have much Christmas bird count data because that would all occur down in here at the sites in the Gulf and over here in South Florida. And you see those sites there, there were 4 of them, showed they were stable there. We showed decreases in the migration, of course, in the east, and a lot of stable here, stable sites as well, and some increases also there. So mostly they're doing pretty well overall. Okay, here's nationwide, 11% increase, 15% decrease in the east, 77% increase overall. Okay, I may have said something wrong back there. Let me go back here. Hang on. I'm not awake yet. Oh yeah, this was 11% decrease overall in North America, 82% increase. And you got 15% decrease in the east. Here's our trends, broad-winged hawks at the Mendota Fire Tower. Our biggest numbers in the last 10 years was in 2011 at almost 10,000 broad-winged hawks. You don't see too much of a trend here, although you could certainly say there was a decrease on down to 2015 here, and with some stabilization here from 2015 on. When Hurricane Florence came through, we missed a lot of hawks we should have had. We didn't have anyone at the tower. That was on September the 28th. And those hawks, once the hurricane passed on through and it held them up, diverted them, and they were going any way they could. They were coming across Sugar Hollow Park in Bristol, Virginia, across a friend's farm down in Johnson City, Tennessee, and so forth. So we missed probably thousands of hawks when they come through that particular day. It was amazing. They were in a hurry to get on with it. Now, if time will allow us here, we'll, yeah, I think we're okay. Are we okay? Talk about Hawk Mountain Sanctuary tracking project up there, Broad-wing tracking project. They're the oldest wildlife sanctuary in the United States. They provide leadership in raptor conservation, science, and education. They have 10 lookouts up there. They're located on Kittatinny Mountain up there, which is a prominent ridge that extends from 60 miles north of New York City to about 20 miles west of Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. It's the southeasternmost corduroy hill in the Appalachian Ridge and Valley province of eastern Pennsylvania. And of course, it provides the prevailing easterly winds in the winter, in the spring, push the birds west of there, so they don't have as many birds in the spring. But during the fall, they've got good winds, which provides a lot of lift coming off of the ridges there. They do a lot of slope soaring as well as the riding of the thermals there. A little history about Hawk Mountain here. In 1934, a lady by the name of Rosalie Edge leased 1,400 acres on Hawk Mountain to prevent hunters from shooting the hawks, which was going on there. At that time, the Pennsylvania Department of Game, Pennsylvania Game Commission, as it was called, had a bounty on certain hawks, particularly accipiters, which were the bad guys. They had posters everywhere with the bounty listed there. The bounty was $5 a hawk. And from 1934 to 1938, they issued 2,097 bounties for northern goshawks, $5 each. In today's dollars, that would be $90 each. That was amazing. So anyway, she took steps to try to protect those hawks. She took steps to try to protect the hawks by leasing the land, and then later, of course, she donated the land to the Hawk Mountain Sanctuary. And of course, they've been counting hawks up there since 1934. Now, why study broad-winged hawks? Well, they decided that, of course, they were going to study them because nearly half of their migration, raptors migrating by there, are broad-winged hawks. Now, about 97% of ours are broad-winged hawks. And these are their numbers. They have 16 species of raptors in the fall. 19,000 of those are average are hawks. I'm sorry, they have 19,000 hawks per autumn season, and half of those are migrating raptors. The Broadway Trap tracking project up there, and this is not the first tracking project. There's been lots of tracking projects, and they track lots of different species of hawks now. The leader is Laurie Goodrich, the director of conservation sites there at Hawk Mountain. She's been there a number of years. And it was designated as a species of concern in Pennsylvania because, as we already mentioned, they're showing declines in the northeastern states. The nesting distribution declined 16% since the 1980s. And little research has been conducted on habitat needs or migration and wintering ecology. And where I mentioned that count trends were down from 2009 to 2019, according to the RPI there. This is just a couple of trend graphs. Here's one from 1966 to 2003. So you can see the downward trend in the counts of hawks there. Here's another one going back from day one, this is 1936 to 2019. Kind of interesting, they had an increase here. You get to the mid 70s and started dropping off in the 1980s, and it kind of leveled off here and on up to 2019. Just a little picture there of their trends there. And this, as I said, this was not the first. The GPS satellites were used to track hawk movements. In the Condor in February 2011, they reported that researchers tracked movements of Swainson's hawks. This is your western video. They tracked their movements using satellite telemetry from 95 to 98, tracked 46 of the Swainson's hawks, tracked them to Argentina and back. Long ways. They went to the Pampas there, over 6,000 miles long. So what did we know about broad-wing migration? According to the Hawk Mountain folks, they knew there were complete migrants. They knew they were long distance. They knew they weren't flying over large bodies of open water. And when they migrate, instead of migrating a few at a time, they migrate in large flocks, have concentrated flights. Here's some of their peak numbers from some of the sites, like Hawk Mountain. The peak numbers there could average anywhere from 2,000 to 22,000 a day, on down to Vera Cruz, where your average per day might be 400,000 to 1 million hawks. Wow, isn't that something? A good day at the Mendota Fire Tower, particularly around the peak time, the 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd of September, might be 2,000 or more up there. We normally don't see that many on the average a day up there during those days, but you might have a good day of 2,000 or more. What they wanted to do here is they wanted to describe the migration routes, the timing, the rates, stopovers, which is kind of a new term we're looking at, and their wintering range. Do they pick wintering ranges similar to where they nest? And also for their stopovers, do they pick wintering, a similar type habitat for their stopovers. They want to compare adults to juveniles, male to females, and Pennsylvania birds to other populations. The purpose was to study, of course, answer questions about the movement ecology, their annual cycles, life history, and the conservation trends as well. Methods, they trapped the birds at the nesting sites. They used two methods. They used your mist nets and a mechanical great horned owl to attract them, and used great horned owl calls. And they actually climbed the trees to get the juveniles to put the satellite transmitters on the juveniles. They found one of the things they're finding up there, the site fidelity is high during nesting season, meaning adults return to the same breeding territories each year. Here's one hawk that returned to the same nesting territory for 4 years. Okay, I've forgotten what they called here. They have names for all these hawks. And here's the habitat cover around Pennsylvania nesting sites is 80% forest, and that's to be expected. And they like other kinds of habitat as well. Some water, some open cover, some field cover, shrub cover, so because that allows them to do some hunting as well. From 2014 to 2020, they deployed 17 satellite telemetry units on female broad-winged hawks, 13 adults, 4 juveniles. They also deployed 3 units on 2 males. Okay, here's what a telemetry unit looks like. They're not heavy at all. They're powered by batteries that then are recharged by the sun. Okay, these units weigh about 9.5 grams or 0.34 ounces. As I said, they contain batteries that are recharged by solar panels. They're placed on the back of the hawk using backpacks made of Teflon ribbon. No harm to the bird, doesn't interfere with flying, roosting, nesting, whatever. No harm to the bird. Now, they also, this time in 2015, and they reported it on at this time, was 3 adult broadwings that they tagged in the Alberta boreal forest, 2 females and a male. Now, one of the things they discovered early on here was what was known as pre-migratory movements. The distance from the nesting range averaged about 38 miles, means the hawks were just wandering around from the nesting range. One hawk here had an average of about 82 miles. This one was traveling a lot further from that. 36% of the birds tagged, or 4 birds, their pre-migratory movements lasted from 7 to 60 days. Okay, this is known in the birding world as post-breeding dispersal, or if it's real young birds, natal dispersal. You're probably familiar with that. I won't go into all of that. Some of the great egrets we see up here may be post-breeding dispersal. They often wander into our area during the summer. Some birds are called floaters. It means they just move around in their territory, just wander around. No one knows for sure why they're doing that. Maybe possibly looking for nesting areas next year, or may just be wanting to go out and visit the neighbors. Who knows what's going on there? But anyway, so how do they know whether they're migrating or they were just they were involved in pre-migratory movements? They don't know. Now, by the way, they tend to leave the nesting territory after the young are fully fledged. So they won't leave the young, and they may leave, of course, once they're fully fledged, they may leave them to allow for more food. Not all females will do this, however. But of course, it almost allows the after fledging, of course, the adults feed the young for several weeks. So once they're fully fledged, they may leave, of course, to give them a chance to find more food, as I'm saying. Now, they define the migrations as starting when the bird tended to go either north or south. We're talking about either spring or winter. First location that is greater than 20 kilometers, that's a little over 12 miles, and south or north of the breeding wintering sites from which the bird continued migrating. Once they went past that and continued going, then they declared that as the beginning of their migration. A roost was just an overnight location. You know, the birds that we see at the Mendota Fire Tower all roost on the southeastern side of the mountain. That's so they can pick up the morning suns. And we'll often see them at the end of the day fly down into the woods. Stopover is a location where the birds spend greater than 24 hours during their migratory journey. The average length, or median length, I should say, of a stopover is 2.5 days. Short stopovers is defined as 3 days. A long stopover is greater than 3 days. Less than 3 days for short, greater than 3 days for the long. All right, now when do the birds start their migration? This is varied. Pennsylvania adults started anywhere from July 25th to September 15th and ended anywhere from October 17th to January 1st. Pretty good spread there, as you can see. Juveniles was a little different. They started later and ended a little earlier. Ended a little later here. They were a little slow and going on down the line, as we'll see. Alberta adults started in early September, ended anywhere from November 27th to December 27th. Springtime coming back, they'll start anywhere from December the 8th, February 26th, end anywhere from April 8th to about the middle of May. Here's your satellite pictures of the birds migrating. You see, they all go around the Gulf of Mexico through Central America and on down into South America here. It's interesting, as you can see, very few, if any, will fly across open water. For some reason, this one hawk flew across a part of the Gulf of Mexico here. I don't know what happened. Maybe it had good tailwinds or something there. Normally, they don't do that. Fall migration averaged 82 to 90 days. Distance traveled, the Pennsylvania adults averaged about 4,950 miles. Pennsylvania adult juveniles, I should say, traveled about 3,263 miles on the average. The Alberta adults, longer distance to fly, flew on the average about 6,263 miles. You notice here the Alberta adults did not fly right down the Rocky Mountains or even just east of the Rockies or west of the Rockies. They flew sort of southeast and then came right down sort of parallel to the Mississippi River. They flew down, eastern Dakotas, eastern Nebraska, eastern Kansas, through Oklahoma, Texas, and on down around the Gulf. And they ended up, instead of in this part of South America, they ended up over here in eastern part of South America, over in Venezuela and Guyana. Kind of interesting. Fastest rate of travel in a day on the average. Now, we're not talking about stopovers or roosting. Now, if you take into account stopover and roosting, the average was 50 to 130 miles a day. But if you don't count those, the fastest days on the average for your Alberta adults was 226 miles in a day. Pennsylvania adults averaged 155 miles in a day. So if we see a hawk come by the Mendota Fire Tower, say at 9 o'clock in the morning, by the end of the day, they're most likely well past Knoxville, Tennessee. The juveniles, they're a little slower, maybe a little lazy, taking their good old time. They'll average 79 miles on a good day there, okay? So that's the looking at the fastest rates of travel. So the stopovers, again, when we define the stopovers, is greater than a 24-hour stay. On the average, the mean length of a stopover in the fall was 3.6 days for a Pennsylvania adult. For the Alberta adults, 2.5 days. The juveniles, oh gosh, they wanted to hang out a good while. That was 13 days. Now going back, there seemed to be maybe overall a little bit bigger hurry, 2.5 days on the average there. And looking at the stopover sites, again, the forest cover 71%, as what could be expected, although they're not quite as choosy. Field cover was higher here. Developed land was higher as well. Now, overall in the winter season, the broadwings go through or spend the winter in at least 10 countries, ranging from Mexico down to Bolivia. The winter habitat is again 88% forest. Gray over here is a kind of lowland, non-flooded evergreen rainforest here. And the green up here, I can't read it real well. Again, it's a kind of a forest area there, kind of evergreen forest area, rainforest. Okay. And what are some of the threats in the winter area? Of course, as you can imagine, illegal mining. About 20% of the wintering area is affected by illegal mining. 2.5% of the wintering area is affected by deforestation for soybeans, for example, particularly in Peru and Brazil. Other threats might include shooting, pesticide use, habitat loss, storms, weather, etc. Might affect them as well. They're going to have to do more study of what happens to these birds during their migration, get a little better handle on what are the causes of death during migration and or during the wintering stayover down there. The key findings were that the Pennsylvania adults wintered in Peru, Colombia, and Brazil. The Pennsylvania juveniles stopped in Central America, shorter migration. Alberta adults wintered farther east in South America. Routes follow the same path north and south as they do south, and they're not elliptical as they were once thought to be. Used to be they knew they were coming through the Gulf, and they knew where they ended up, but they weren't sure about the flight pattern once they left Texas until they got farther north to some of the sites that were counting hawks in the springtime. They still may be somewhat elliptical as they get up toward the Great Lakes, but they're not sure about that. The synchronous timing begins during migration, meaning coming together, getting in sync. They start on a broad front, as I've said before, and by the time they get to the Gulf, they're pretty much coming together. And by the way, even though data is showing a drop in the numbers migrating in the east, coming out of the northeast, by the time birds get to Texas and on around into the Gulf, they're not showing any decline in their numbers down there. So that tells us that something else is kind of going on, and we don't know for sure what's affecting that. And of course, the most losses during migration, which they need to analyze some more. And hopefully I can report on that in a future presentation. So what happens when it comes to when they get there to Central and South America? There are lots of folks who are trying to protect areas where birds spend the winter or where birds stay year round. And that's a dangerous job doing that. In the Audubon magazine, the summer of 2021 edition, there was an article called The Violent Cost of Conservation. And it said each year more people die while attempting to protect the world's most biodiverse places like Colombia, the Philippines and India, and the Central African coast and Central Africa are considered the worst places. At least 225 people were killed in 2020. Sorry, I had a telemarketer there. At least 225 people were killed in 2020. Many more were attacked and threatened. Two-thirds of these died in Latin America. Those with close connections to the land, like small-scale farmers, tribal leaders, activists, and organizers, are often the most at risk. Park managers, rangers, indigenous forest guardians, and anti-mining activists are being threatened, run out of protected areas, and in ancestral lands, in many cases, murdered. Many observers say that the rise of authoritarian leaders and populist politics has emboldened illegal miners, loggers, and land grabbers, and has led governments to use national security legislation to squash the protests. Colombia, as you see here, is considered the most dangerous place, averages 2 deaths per week in 2020. Yet they're one of the most biodiverse places on Earth. They have over 2,000 species of birds there alone. 2,000 species out of 10,000 species of birds worldwide. By the way, birds are the #1 invertebrate as far as the number of species, #1 in the world. 10,000 species. That's great, isn't it? Okay, well, I guess we'll stop there and hope to be able to present another summary of some of these seminars in the future. If you see these being advertised or posted, it really pays to watch them because I learned a lot. One thing about birding is it is other aspects of nature. You just when you think you know it all, you don't. So as we go off into the sunset, looking at this beautiful picture by Jennifer Mead of Gate City, Virginia. Thank you again for joining me, and I hope this provided you with some useful information, and I hope you have many years enjoying the birds, particularly the hawks. Thank you. Okay.
Ron, thank you very much. Let
Thank you,
me
Phil.
stop recording here.